my card. My name is Bill Carlson. I am from Omaha, Nebraska, home of the College World Series, which is occurring as we speak. In fact, when I left on Sunday morning, I was greeted with many more people than I thought I'd see leaving Omaha at 5 a.m. in the morning. And they were all folks that had come for the College World Series and now needed to go back to their normal lives, right? So they all descended on the airport at the same time I did. I thought, I thought it might have been Warren Buffett, right? He tends to draw a crowd too. So Data Axle and the product is Reference Solutions. We went through a name change. That's hence the Data Axle is now our company name, and the product name is Reference Solutions. It is in essence the exact same database. We made some cursory changes to it, obviously the name being the greatest. We left the URL. You've probably noticed that. We left the URL the same. Library patrons can access the database through your library, whether they're internal to the library and it will authenticate automatically, or when they're at home or maybe on vacation or somewhere where they're traveling. I always encourage patrons when I talk to them, you know, if you plan on a summer vacation and you're going to an area that you're not real familiar with, you could use the database to find out information about art galleries or museums or maybe movie theaters. You know, we always hope for the best in terms of weather, but that's not necessarily always the case. So maybe they need to take the kids to a movie or something, right? They could certainly learn about all those movie theaters in that particular area. Not to mention, back in the day, we used to sell a lot of data, business data, to a little company that you probably visit their website once or twice or 10 times a day called Google, right? They acquired all of their address level data from us. Now that they've had that little car running around, they don't need us quite as much, but they still acquire all of their points of interest data. So that would include hospitals, 7-Elevens, those kinds of convenience stores, grocery stores, campgrounds. So all of that kind of information is still acquired by them of us, and we make that available also in the database. So if somebody is going to an area and they were considering camping, right, they could see if there was a KOA or any of those kinds of places that might be of interest to them. But we know that the lion's share the database are generally looking at it for most often marketing, right? They're looking to identify businesses that they could reach out to and perhaps sell them their product or service, whatever that might be. Or on the other side of the coin, there is that marketing to consumers. So it might be B2B or B2C, right? So we do have that B2C data as well. We take all of our data through an update process. On the business side of the house, we verify that data by making phone calls to those businesses. So back in the day when we had an office, prior to the pandemic, there were roughly 1,100 of us in the office in Omaha. That number is quite reduced from back in the heyday when all of our data would initially come from Ma Bell and those things called phone books, right? That's how we got our initial sets of data. And we still get phone books today, digitally these days. So we used to be labor intensive. We had people that had to break down those phone books. And then of course we had the people that would do the data entry, right? As we grew and as we matured, we acquired some businesses. Do you all do anything with Polk City Directories? Are you familiar with that? That's our company. We've owned them for probably 40 plus years. So we've acquired some companies that either A, we can get data through, and or B, technology through. In fact, Data Axle, as our new name, is also a tool that we use. It's truly a database that we use to upload live real-time data through that platform so that our customers that go in through an API feed can get that data immediately as it relates to those businesses or consumers that are in the database. So on that business side of the house, we're still using those phone books. We call them once a year to verify name of that business, that certainly that address. Since they answered the phone, we know that phone number is correct. We capture number of employees if they'll provide that to us, who that owner or manager might be of that particular location, the information related to other lines of business that they might be involved with, right? They might have a primary line of business as X, but they might do several other things. Think about a convenience store. Oftentimes they have their fuel, right? But then they have their convenient business. Then they have oftentimes another form of business. Who might be able to share what that other business might be? Gaming. Some areas, yes, gaming would be true. Oftentimes, though, they sell food, don't they? Don't they sell pizza or hot dogs or hamburgers? That's considered their restaurant for part of the business. So we try and capture all of that information. We're pushing those updates out live every third Thursday of the month. So a dozen times throughout the year, we're going through and updating based on what we're learning in those phone calls. We also do some website mining. We do use AI, but our primary form of verification is still that phone call, right? We want to be able to talk to those folks. Yes?
We have 107 million businesses, and you
yes.
say every single one of them gets a phone call every year.
The question, I almost forgot, the question was, there's 107, since we're being recorded, there are 107 million businesses, and I'm saying that all of them don't get a phone call. And I'll show you the difference once we're in the database. Have you noticed, as users maybe going in and helping a patron, that we have our verified records, we have our unverified, and we also have our closed? So as we make those phone calls, we may not get a business that had been verified. We don't give up after one attempt. We'll continue to try to reach that business a dozen attempts throughout the course of 2 years. And our system is automatically set up to change the day of week and time of day for the second call, the third call if need be, and so on. Our researchers work Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., and then on Saturday, 8 to 5. So we're always changing that time, because we don't want to call back at the same time and expect a different result, right? So we do that. As we go through that process, if we've learned that they're no longer in business, obviously we'll move them into our closed file, where they will remain for 1 year from time of that entry. So anybody could go in and look and see is Bill's Bait still open or not. On the unverified records, if we can't get them and we haven't seen any activity, but we can't say that they're closed, then we'll move them from that verified status into that unverified. We also get Secretary of State's office filings for new businesses. We get them also through utility hookups and postal processing. So postal is one of our longtime licenses with USPS, National Change of Address. So we learn about that kind of activity through that source. We may not have a phone number. That might be our first issue to overcome, is getting a phone number for that new business. If we're not able to do that, we may never get that business verified. So as it relates to industries like e-commerce, I wouldn't say that we have all e-commerce businesses in the database, simply because some of them are truly just this face of this internet site, but that's it. There's no physical address, there's no phone number by which to reach them. But we do have e-commerce as a category, because that's a type of business, right? A line of business. So we go through that process with all of those business records. On the consumer side, so white pages is easy enough to figure out where that information is coming from, right? Although you've probably noticed in the white pages that we also have information regarding census data. So we get that census tract information, block group and tract number, and then we overlay the estimated home value and home income based on that particular area. Same thing is done in our consumer lifestyles data, but you've probably, has anybody not been into the consumer lifestyles database? So everybody's been in there. You've probably noticed all of those various categories regarding, do they like to travel? Do they have pets? Do they, are they into crafts? That kind of stuff. So we're capturing that literally from hundreds of sources and bringing it all back, and we do this every month at that address level. Let me give you a for example. I was not in the database under the consumer lifestyles when I first moved back into Omaha. I had a hunting buddy, his name was Wyatt. Wyatt became ill about the time I made the move, and I thought he was missing his old place, but it wasn't, it didn't have anything to do with that. The dog food I'd been feeding him, they changed the formula, and whatever that change was, he could no longer palate. I learned that through the vet after some of this, right? So the vet suggested, get him an all meat, an all fish, or an all poultry product, he'll be fine. So I went to a Petco because it was close to my grocery store. I found some dog foods, I tried a couple of different ones, finally found one he seemed to like. And he continued to perform well in the field, so that was kind of an important factor as well. I showed up in the database after all of that purchase activity, and I did sign up for a PALS card at some point in time in my relationship with that particular location. So a couple of ways that they have seen me through that PALS membership, as well as the credit card processor. So often people, when they stick their card or swipe or put the magnetic strip there, they think that that's MasterCard that's doing that, or Visa that's doing that, or American Express that's managing that. That is through a credit card processing company. So we do get some of that credit card activity related to those things that they like. I don't have card numbers, I don't have any of that kind of sensitive data, but I do know those activities that those people enjoy outside of perhaps work, right? So I showed up in the database as a dog lover because of my frequent activity, because he ate like a horse. So let me show, and there's one that you can't see here. I want to point this out because, you know, this could be a great resource even for the library to use themselves, and that's our new movers, new homeowners. So we're getting that information weekly. Most of our stuff is done monthly, but the new businesses is weekly, and so are the new movers, new homeowners. And we're getting that through that census, or excuse me, through our license agreement with USPS change of address. So we're updating that weekly. We have that new address that that person has moved to, and then you could identify that universe that have moved into the libraries area over anything as recently as last week, all the way up through the last year. So just like with the new businesses, they'll remain in there for 1 year from time of entry. And that can be an excellent resource to use. So jobs and internships, we're actually in the process of a new vendor coming online. That we're hoping that's going to happen here in a couple of weeks. So it's not currently functioning now. The healthcare database, has anybody gone into that particular module? So I've used that on a couple of occasions when I've been referred to a doc and I wanted to get a little insight about that doc. That's going to have information about those physicians, about those dentists. Where did they go to school? What year did they graduate? What's their medical specialty? You know, do they accept new patients? That kind of information. We're updating that monthly. Standard white pages, like we talked about, is just that, along with that census data. Consumer lifestyle's a bit more detailed. The Canadian white pages, just like the standard white pages. The universal search is a new tool. It allows you to search both the business and consumer database simultaneously, right? And then that new movers. Let me show you that one because it's really kind of an easy database to search. Nice thing about it, some of the filters that I'll show you that you can use for searching are available in all of the modules, right? So it's understanding that some of those processes are the same no matter which module you might go into. So let me do this. Let me launch this. And feel free, if you have a question, something comes to mind, I'm way okay with answering your questions based on where I'm at in the database than maybe needing to back up to it. But either way, you can certainly share any questions. I'm going to forego this quick search and go right to advanced. And by the way, know that when these additional filters, this is the back door into advanced search. It's not like you're going to see something different when you click on that. It's always going to take you, as it notes, to that advanced search tab. I could do a name search, but allow me to introduce this fact. We'll always give you the name, so you don't have to, unless you're looking for Bob Smith, right? If you're looking for Bob Smith, that's one thing. However, if you're just interested in getting of people that are in a particular area, we'll always give you that name because we've got that through that national change of address. Same thing, in fact, with phone number in this particular module, rarely are you going to see phone numbers because that's not something someone includes on that national change of address, right? So rarely are you going to see those. There is an international national change of address, and I have seen phone numbers related to that, but not very many. Obviously, geography works the same no matter what module we're in, and I'll show you a few ways that you can use that. We have these residential details. I'll certainly show you some of these. This mailing address, this is a new filter that we have added through USPS. And when you select that, as it notes here, once you decide to use it, it's only going to include those records with a highly deliverable address. So if people want to do marketing, but they also don't want to pay or waste money for sending out maybe a postcard to these folks and have it returned. Here they paid the postage and it gets returned. Not a very good way to do business, right? Because it costs them. So what we do is we give you that as an option to avoid those potential returns to sender, right? Thank you for joining us. And by the way, there are some learning aids back there on the table if you would like. So I do like to introduce that, and this is available in many of our modules. If it's not there, it's not missing, it's just not available in that particular module. So we give you some of that mortgage detail. Guess who likes to see that kind of insight? Anybody want to take a stab at that one? Their letter starts, the first name of their industry starts with the letter B. Bankers, yes, banking. They love to see that kind of insight. Relocation details. I often include this because that can be a critical piece for you to use to help understand how far away these people may have come to your community, right? So that could be instrumental. And then, of course, we give you lots of ways that you can exclude information. You know, maybe you want to look across the entire county, but you want to leave one city or a few zip codes out. You could always do that. It's up to you in terms of how that's put together. So let's do this. Let's use your city. And just put in the city, select go, and there's only one of you, right? How many Omahas are out there in the US? 5 of us. Gosh, I thought we were unique too, but we're not that unique. You all are. So I'm going to put in your community, and I'm going to say move distance and time frame. I usually like to point these out specifically because if people didn't want to know about people who've moved around from within the community, you could choose to exclude those. So if we were to guess, if we were all crows and I wanted to fly across all the way across the community. How many miles might that be?
About 10 probably.
10 miles. Okay.
Roughly township size.
You know what? I'll start out at 12. We can put any number we want. So I'll go with 12, and I want to get both coasts, so I'm going to say 2,800 miles. Then the default is always at this 6 months, but again, that could be as recent as last week, 3 weeks ago, 9 months ago, or within the last year. So let's look at the last 3 months. How many people do I have that have moved from at least 12 miles away? 195 in the last 3 months. So if the library wanted to, they could even do some outreach to these 195 new people to let them know about, hey, we're over here, come get your library card, maybe sign up for the summer reading program if you have children, yada, 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 right? So great resource to be able to identify that. I could even use these residential details. For example, when I offer this to the public, I try and find out if there are any businesses in attendance that are service industry businesses. I mean like plumbers, contractors, the guy or gal that has the business that sprays for bugs and other things you don't want in your house. Certainly, maybe it's a lawn care service, right? They would love to know about the people that are new homeowners or potential homeowners. So I can identify that and say, of that 195, how many of them are confirmed or probable homeowners? I have 30 leads now that I could use to identify those particular individuals. Or maybe I sell real estate. Wouldn't I love to know about these renters? So I've got 30 of those. I guess the remaining are renters. Well, not exactly. There is a category. We didn't make it queryable, but there is a fourth category, and it's not available. We just didn't have enough information available. So if I were that real estate person, I have 110 opportunities there that I could send out a mail piece to and say, hey, I'm in your neighborhood, this is my business address, when you're ready, I'm ready, you know, however they want to frame that, right? And then they could get to that. So let me show you that entire audience, all 195. Whenever we talk about any of the consumer data, we all information regarding the do not call registry, right? We're responsible for making certain that consumers are aware, hey, you can't just be calling any of the phone numbers that are listed on here without having them run through the do not call, right? They can get a clean list and then call, but again, do we have any phone numbers there? I don't see a one on that page. So they won't be doing any calling unless it's to Ghostbusters at this point, right? So here's the information you're going to see. I'm going to have name, address, city, state, zip. This person moved from 25 miles away to come into your community. They're a renter. Again, no phone number. Then there's that neighborhood information. So that census data is provided, and then we overlay this based on what the census has indicated in that particular area. This is the only module that you can use an age range to identify an audience group. So I can use any of those features listed there as a filter to drive in the kinds of results I ultimately like to see. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And there's some treats over there. I refer to them as learning aids, but it's up to you. So obviously, you can get to all of that data. The only thing I didn't expand was this location map. We have that on all of our records because we have that latitude and longitude in the background. So we know where those dwellings are all at and or businesses. So that information is always going to be provided to you. Now there are some tools that I like to show. Our charts tool. Has anybody used this charts tool when looking at either businesses and or consumer kinds of records? What this will do, breaking down consumer records, is it's going to first give you that home value. So it gives you that breakdown based on that home value. I could change it to income if that were a factor for me. You know, I could be looking at all those people that are either probable or confirmed homeowners, and maybe I've got that landscape business. I could then be reaching out to those folks that I believe would be most likely to be interested in my services or products. So I could always do that. I could switch it up. We know we're in one state, but there's the zip codes across your community. So if I wanted to work it that way, I could look at it based on zip code. All of this information, and I always point this out to those folks with SCORE or Chamber of Commerce, all of this information can be, in fact, printed or downloaded, made part of a PowerPoint presentation. Right? So can be some great insight there that they can take advantage of. And then we also have another tool that you'll find in many of the databases, and it's our heat map. This gets a lot of use around the Midwest in December, January. No, I'm kidding. It's our heat map, and it will overlay those 195 in your community that we're looking at, right? And it does it like this. It will pinpoint them since there are fewer than 300 records. It will always give you those pinpoints. It gives you that legend on the left-hand side. And I can either hover over, for example, there happens to be a plus symbol right here, indicates that there are 8 results at that location. I could click there and it will give me the first of those 8 that I'm about to look at. And if I just wanted to go to that record, I could click on that name and get to that record. So know you're able to move about in this fashion, if that's important. If it's over 300 records, I'll show you what that particular map will look like once we get into another database. Any questions regarding these new movers, new homeowners, or the filters I might have used to display them? Yes?
So I noticed under home ownership, there's the probable listing.
Yes.
What does that, I mean, how is that attained?
That's all captured. All of that data is coming through USPS, National Change of Address, and I forgot to answer the question, or ask that question. So the question was, how is all that home ownership data attained? And it's all coming through that USPS, National Change of Address.
I didn't know if you were working through like the assessor's office or something like
Oh, no, yeah. We other than like Census Bureau, we work a lot with Census. We work a lot with, on the business side of the house, we work a lot with the Department of Labor to get insights about labor industry kinds of issues related to all the different kinds of businesses. But other than those two, we don't do anything with state governments other than on the new business listings. We get those through the Secretary of State's filings. Yeah.
And what does not available?
We just didn't, there wasn't enough information available to make a call one way or the other. In other words, USPS couldn't give us any additional, there was no apartment number, there was nothing like that. There was no link to any kind of insight regarding a mortgage, so just not enough information available. Great question. Oh, and I forgot to, I'll get this by the time we're done, right? So the question was, how do we get to that not available? And that would be that through that process I just mentioned. So, other questions regarding any of those filters and or the records themselves? They're in there for 1 year. Just realize they move out. They move then. I do get this question on occasion. I'm sure somebody in this group would have gotten to it sooner or later. If I have that consumer data at that old address about those things that they enjoyed spending their discretionary cash on, why isn't it available in here as well? We decided not to pull any data with it because we don't know that everything is going to be the same at that address as it was at the old address. You know, they may have had a Wyatt, like I have, or had, that they brought with them to that new address, or the dog may not have made it, right? Sometimes that happens. So we don't know that everything is going to be the same, so we just decided to start at scratch. Let's do this. I'm going to select Reference Solutions. It's going to bring me right back to my home page, and I'll show you how to get to the database from the library's website at the end. So I'm going to launch the U.S. Business Database. That gets a lot of attention. I do want to show you this example real quick. So we'll use your community again. And go Illinois. Now, whenever I'm looking at data, whether I'm looking for a company by name, an executive, maybe looking at a phone number, it's only going to be looking at my verified records. So as it relates to verified records across your community, I have some 6,242 businesses that are verified. Let me chart this for you. So now when I use the charts, it's going to break these businesses down by the type of business that they're in initially. And that's always done using the SIC codes. That's the Standard Industrial Classification Code. It's an old coding system that Uncle Sam actually began in the mid-30s. It was for most federal agencies discontinued when Bill Clinton was president and signed that very first North American trade agreement between us, Mexico, and Canada. That's when the NAICS codes were born. We, many years ago when we started in 1972, we only had the SIC codes. So we enhanced them over what Uncle Sam had done with them. There isn't a one-for-one on the NAICS codes. So all of our records bridge initially from the SIC code to the corresponding NAICS codes. So think about businesses that have come online since back in the early 90s. Can you think of any types of industries that are now popular in, I'll just give you a hint, they're popular in many states, but not all states. And I'm not talking about the insurance company either.
The tech sector, the technology sector.
Certainly technology, right? But that can be in any state. Dispensaries, right? There wasn't a thing as known as a dispensary back in the day, unless it was Uncle John's, right, or something like that. So we obviously had to make an SIC code for that industry, and there is a corresponding NAICS code for that industry because the NAICS were in place then, right? So we always create an SIC code in any of those new industries cases, and then obviously we'll bridge to that appropriate NAICS code. So no, we'll always give you that, and we give you this top 7 view. So of that 6,000 some records I had, those 1,292 make up this top 7. Physicians and surgeons are at the top of that list simply because they're all 1099 guys and gals, right? Same with attorneys, etc. So we have a lot of those professionals listed on that top 7. And then when you scroll down, I was looking to see where my restaurants might be. Oh my gosh, you guys are underserved. I don't see any restaurants on the first page. Oh, they are. Oh, how did I look past that one? They are number 2, in case you noticed. So I have restaurants, obviously. Notice I have kiosks. I have every kind of kiosk you can imagine. You've probably been into Walmart and seen those kiosks where you can exchange coins, right? That Coinstar company, we have those kinds of kiosks. Most filling stations, or a lot of filling stations, will have those propane tanks that you can switch out. That's another form of kiosk, right? So we have all of those. I can choose, if I want, once I'm in advanced search, to exclude any of those kinds of records. So kiosks often get excluded, so do ATMs, right? Nobody's gonna call their ATM, or at least I've tried it a couple of times late at night and they didn't give me more money. I don't know, I must have had a wrong number at that point. So no, you can get to any of this kind of information. If I wanted to get into this real estate, I could just click on that 79 and I'd be taken just to that group of records. Or I can switch this information up. Maybe again, I want to look at those zip codes. So I have that broken down. Sales volumes. I mentioned when I was talking about how we verify records that we ask this question as it relates to number of employees. Roughly 70, 72, 73% of those businesses will give us an exact number. We've got 5 or we've got 11, whatever that number might be. Those that choose not to answer that question, we look at their peers in that same area and we'll assign a range instead. So whenever you've seen one of our records, if there's a range there, know that we did not get that in our phone call. And as it relates to sales volumes, we learned a long time ago, you don't call up Bob's Garage and say, hey Bob, this is Bill from Exact Data. What do you think you're gonna make this year in terms of income? Bob was probably gonna maybe disconnect quickly or something, right? So we use that Bureau of Labor information to get sales volume data, and then that goes into our model. So we use that. We look at how long they've been in business, right? There's value in that age. We look at other lines of business that they're in. Certainly that number of employees comes into that. And then we look at where's that business physically located so we can allow for differences with taxes. So just realize that sales information, and I've had businesses in my trainings, and some will say, who gave you that? Because I'm gonna fire them. That's spot on. They're not supposed to give out that kind of data. And others will say, oh, that's off, right? It's modeled. So know that that sales information is always gonna be modeled unless it's a publicly traded company, and then we'll get that from their 10K. So let me go back here, and I'm gonna revise this search simply because I can do so many more things once I'm in advanced search. So let me click there, and the first thing I would point out would be the verified, the unverified, and then those closed records. So the closed records will remain in there for 1 year, and then after that year expires, the only place they can be found is in our historical data. No longer would that be available in those business records. The unverified, they could be in there for years. We will try periodically to include unverifieds, to call them even after that 2 years. But if we can't get any information, and especially if we don't have a phone number, kind of tough to get any data, right? So those could be in there for a long time. The verified data, that's the information that goes through that annual update. And we can always search by company name, that legal name. I was helping a patron who'd called in one day, and you know, if you've ever spent any time with folks on the phone, you can tell if they're like maybe not real excited about the phone call they're needing to make, but they're making it anyway. So she was upset because a local business was not in the database. And I said, what's the name? And I quickly did a name search, and sure enough, no records were found. I said, well, let's try this. Did you include unverified and closed? And she said, no, I just did this from the quick search. I said, let's go to advanced search. So we did that, still no record. And this was a company in Baltimore, Maryland. I then, at that point, thought, there's gotta be another way we might be able to get to this data. I said, what kind of business are they in? And she said, it's an ice cream parlor. So I did a keyword search for ice cream parlor, found the SIC code along with the description. It was the 6th business listed in the 52 that came up. She'd given me the wrong name. It was that simple, right? But had we just left it at, oh, must not be in there, she'd have gone away disappointed and probably not used the database again. And I wouldn't have really done my job either, right? Trying to solve it. So always lots of ways to solve it. You can always pull in those other filters. This does not get a lot of use simply because people are usually looking for as many businesses with a name, not by a name. But if they want to do it by a name, they certainly can. Always available. Executive information doesn't get a lot of use. However, title does seem to get a bit more than the other three. Oftentimes, and I think it's used to identify certain types. I had a gentleman from just north of you here in Wisconsin that had called up and he was looking for these titles. And he was looking in the Madison area and he specifically wanted human resources and those executives that are human resources. And he said that was it. And it pulled up less than 100 records. And he said, there should be more than that. I said, there absolutely should be. I said, what are we leaving out? He said, well, I've got the two that you have listed. I said, there's one that we didn't include, and that's owner. Because whenever you tell the system, this is what you want, it's only going to look at that. But lots of smaller companies that have an owner present, that owner wears the HR hat. And they also wear the stock the shelves hat and the other hat, right? They wear multiples. So we included owner and he had plenty of records to go after at that point in time. And you can always include number of employees or sales volumes if that's a driver that would help you get to a more defined group of records, right? Always available. So I would tell you that executive gets more use than those other three, but no, you can always search with that. And we do have gender and ethnicity. And under ownership, we also have this female, veteran, and minority-owned businesses. We're getting all of this data through the SBA PPP loans that these people have been awarded. So they could always do a search for those types of businesses as well. Keyword is usually the way that most people will search. This is what I search looking for ice cream parlors, right? You can look for any kind of industry. Let's do this just for the heck of it. Let's go with one of my favorite searches when I'm on the road, right? I always need to get my next IV worth of coffee, and I'm always looking for that. So here's my all-inclusive for all coffee shops. And then if we do your community, what county are we in Cook? Oh, we don't want to do Cook. Too big. We'll do your community. We'll just do your community. Let's go, and I have it there because I've been there before. So there's my listing. I have a total of 39 around the village, right? I noticed on the signage coming in that you refer to yourselves as the village, right? So notice I'm looking at all SIC codes. If I change this up to search only primary, in other words, Starbucks, right? How many do I have? 13. So it kicked out places like the 7-Eleven down the street that also serves coffee. That would be a secondary or tertiary SIC code under their business. So I can get that specific if I need to. True story, during the pandemic, I got a call from a woman who was almost in a panic. And she said, I'm not really familiar with how to use this database, but somebody told me about it. I'd love your help. And I said, sure, what are we looking for? She said, it's really simple. I just want to find all the Starbucks between Chicago and Denver, Colorado. I'm like, that's a lot of coffee, but we found them. We found them all right along I-80. So life was good at that point. She got what she needed. So you can do any kind of keyword search, or you can use our major industry group, which are just those SIC codes, and just as Uncle Sam had set these up initially. So if you were looking for, maybe you couldn't think of the category that you needed, and I'll call it handyman services, right? And it's not listed as Angie in the database. I'm gonna look for, under construction, handyman services. Well, I'm probably not gonna look under heavy construction, and I'm probably not gonna look under special trades, so that leaves this last one. So I'll click on that plus symbol next to general contractors. There was the 4-digit number Uncle Sam stopped with. They didn't go any further. So I would have to guess at that point. We've broken that out and made it this much more granular. So look at all of that business type that you can get specific with. And those handyman services are listed right there. So if you can't think of the title that you might need to find under a keyword, you can always come in, do more research, but you can always come in here and find it that way as well, if that would be helpful. So that's always available. Of course, I can use any of these geography selects. I do have that mail address information there if I want to exclude any of those that might not pick up their mail, right? I have that phone information. This doesn't got a lot of use, but you could, if you wanted to know all the businesses within a given area code, you could do that. Number of employees, sales volume, it gets lots of use. People want to be able to use that. Ownership gets lots of use. I would point out public or private, and then headquarters or branch, and we also have subsidiaries, so if you needed that, or those single locations, right? That's a very frequently used filter. We do have those businesses that have a foreign parent. We just don't go over to the foreign parent. Let me give you an example. You're probably familiar with Saks Fifth Avenue. They used to be wholly owned. They have sold out to the Hudson Bay Company, which is in Canada. So we don't go, even though they're next door, we don't go up there, right? It stops at Saks Fifth Avenue, Inc. in New York City. So know that that's how that would work. Home-based businesses, we have those. Financial data, we give you lots of selections there. Helped a gentleman a few weeks ago when I was out in, where was I? I was in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey, and did a program there. We had 28 folks. Some of them came as a result of their SCORE mentors. Some came with economic development, etc. And this gentleman, it was the easiest search I'd had to do all day. He was looking, he owns a smart business, and he sells that smart business to those businesses that are looking to add cameras, get thermostats that are set up, etc. So he wanted technology, and this was going to be his sweet spot. He didn't want to go real low, because if they didn't make a lot or spend a lot in that category, chances are they weren't going to spend it on his services because they were kind of expensive, right? But he also didn't want those large ones either, because they already had those services. So this was really about this sweet spot. I have that information and then the last thing that he was looking at was his county. That's all he wanted, and he got an entire list of those businesses. And he was going to market to those folks. He was going to make phone calls to those folks. Then I have some special selects. I would point this out. Years in the database over year established. We have 100% of our records when we establish them. We do not have 100% of those as it relates to the year that they were established. Oh, perfect. Yes, you may give away one of my cards. No worries. No worries. So we do have that information, and what I would point out is, I'm going to go years in the database. Let's look at businesses that have started in your community during the pandemic. So I'm going to skip year 1 and 2, and I'm going to say 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I still have your community listed there. I have a total of 1,400 new businesses smack during the pandemic. Wow. Wow. Now, how many of those businesses know that the database offers access to this kind of data? right? I mean, that's just that general question I always ask libraries. And of those, how many of those are home-based businesses? So I only want to look at those that are home-based businesses. Of that 1,400 nearly, I have 58 of them that are home-based businesses. So it's amazing when you overlay some of these filters, the kind of information that you can get. For me, it's always about planting those seeds. I'm a farmer at heart, right? I'm planting seeds. So know you can get to that kind of insight. I always point out professionals all are one. If you wanted to know that there was a doctor's office or an attorney's office within a particular search, but you didn't want to get every single attorney or every single doc, you could change this from the all to that one, and you'll get just that one listing with a primary contact as we know it. So great way to kind of dedupe the records. So know that that's available, and then we give you lots of ways, including excluding those ATMs and kiosks. Lots of times people want to be able to do that. So let's make this a really simple, easy search, and I will use Cook for this example. So we'll go with Illinois. Where did you go? And we'll grab Cook. I know you're down here. You're cooking somewhere down here, aren't you? There you are. So I have a total, oops, I better put in my keyword. I was getting excited. Let's do, we're not gonna do you. We're gonna do restaurants. All restaurants, I have that total. Oops, I didn't add my restaurants, better add that. Now I have a total of 12,000. Wow. Across your county. I'll select SIC only, primary. I've got 9,300. Here's what I wanted to show you with that map. I have my heat map, and within that shape, it will take Cook County, and it's going to overlay all of that information. So I've got some hot spots there in the center, where there's a lot of restaurants, of course, yellow meaning less, green less, and where there's any gaps or holes, you'll have to go home for breakfast. Or come to the library if there's donuts, right? So know you can always overlay it in this fashion. And I can choose any geography. I can look at several states if I wanted to, right? I might need several states worth of data. I can always download this information. It will always say how many downloads can be done at a time. So 500 would be 20 pages. The way they get that is putting a check mark there, they advance to page 2, and they just repeat that step for 20 pages. Once they're ready, they can select that download. Helped a gentleman the other day, he had a new computer, and for whatever reason, he couldn't get the comma delimited to download for him. So what I had him do was email it to himself. It went immediately into Excel, and all was good in his life, right? So it just depends on what fish you want to fry, right? But we can always do comma delimited, and that's what's going to be mailing label friendly. So you can print mailing labels, that kind of stuff. Summary gives them a lot of data, right? The name, the address, the phone number of that business. It will also give them that owner or manager, etc., number of employees, sales volume, and then it's a matter of, do I want to download it or do I want to email it? And email gets used a fair amount, especially if they're working with a partner and they want to be able to send that same information to their partner. And then you simply have to select the word back. It will always go back to the last page that was selected, in this case, page 3. I do need to get rid of these check marks before I go to my 21st page, if I were doing all 20. And the easiest way to do that, revise search. We don't forget how you build it. View results. And then in this number page box, notice all the check marks are gone. In this number page box, you would just type in 21 and enter, and you're able to get more records at that point. Oh, and good. So we do have this company that has a corporate tree. Let me show you their corporate structure. I usually use Arby's. They're a part of a huge company. I challenge you to look them up. You will be amazed at how big they are. So 0 other subsidiaries. Arby's has 46 total, and 79 branches. The company that owns Arby's has over 61,000 branches. So huge company. But I can always get to this information, right? So if that's important to me, and this is a private company, I've got that PV and identifying it as a private company. And if I want to get to just that one record, I can click on it. Or I can open up. Has anybody been to this particular restaurant? It's the barbecue chicken. Well, that's going to be the next question. Who's going to report back about their experience at? So I'm going to have that name and address. This is a verified record. I have that industry profile, several options under there, right? They're a restaurant, but they also have carry-out food. Surprise. I do have that map embedded on every record, so of course that's going to show there. Last updated in June of last year, so guess what's happening this month? The next update, right? When we contacted them, they told us they had 11 employees. If you see a range there instead, they didn't answer that question. We've got June as that owner. Probably not going to have any company news through Bing about this particular location, but there might be. Have some of that business expenditures. They've not been in our database very long. Oh, and you all don't have access to the historical database. If you would like to see that on we can do a virtual call or something like that, and I can show you that kind of information, I'd be happy to do so. Then we have UCC filings, so if they've taken out any loans, that would be captured there. Some of those nearbys, etc. The only time you won't see competitors is if it's a nonprofit, a church, something like that. Otherwise, you'll always see competitors as well, all based on that SIC code. So know that every one of those records is going to be set up in a similar fashion. And I hate that it's now an hour. Do we have maybe 5 minutes left? Okay, let me show you the consumer lifestyles. That's a popular one. So I'm going to select reference solutions, going to bring me right back home. I'll go to the consumer lifestyles. Helped a gentleman with this very search the other day. We'll just use your community again. There's my listing. I'll go 1 per household. In other words, I don't want multiples at the same address, right? I just want to see 1 head of household at that address. I'm going to include these lifestyle characteristics. So the gentleman that I'm referring to was interested. He's opened up a physical fitness facility in the Phoenix area. So he was interested in just this category. And we did talk about these other 2. He was going to come back to that at a later time, but he really wanted to make this his focused audience group. So if we look at folks that are into that in your community, I have some 4,863 records. I'll go into that particular group. Now I could be overlaying estimated home income, right? If I wanted to be able to make certain that I'm using my marketing dollars wisely, I'm probably going to market to those people that I believe would be able to afford my services, right? Fact of life. So I'll say that this is my sweet spot. So of that 4,800, how many do I have left? 2,500. I do have the ability, I could save my searches, and you may have noticed that there. So when a library patron decides they want that personal account, they can enter in their they can enter in their own email address and create their own password, and then they can save any of their searches. That way they don't have to do that download all at once. They could come back over time and get more. So that's a popular filter. So here are my records. Let's go into Susan here. I've got that name and address. Everything we've seen, appears married, been in this home for a couple of minutes anyway. There's that neighbor, and then we're overlaying that S and home value based on when that census was last done. And then here are those lifestyle indicators. The record came in was because of. So there is a scoring mechanism that's at play here. Let me show you that. It is right here where you would make your selections based on those filters that you want to use, and it's 0 through 9. We'll only show you records of people who are fairly active in the category that you selected. So, in other words, as it mentions here, if they're a 0, they have no interest, their record's not going to show, period. But if they're a 9, definitely going to show. We'll only show you records of people who score a 6 or higher. And towards the end of July, there's going to be a new filter added to that, and it will include the ability to select your own numbers, right? So you could say, I just want to see 6s, or I just want to see, thinking maybe that those 6s haven't been marketed to perhaps as much as the 9s might be, right? So great tool to use. One of them that I also point out to my libraries, especially if I know that there are friends of the library in attendance, would be those charitable donors. So it just depends on how you want to frame your search. But just because, let's go to these charitable donors, of which I have 5,200. Just because you might see these other, I'll open up Dana here. Just because you see other, well, don't see a lot of others in this one. In this case, I have credit card user and charitable donor, period. But if there were a bunch of other ones listed here, don't assume that those are automatically going to fall into that 6 through 9, because they may not, right? So if consumer data is important, that's available. Any questions regarding this or anything that I've shared to this point? Other than I'm going to share how to get there, because this will go to regular patrons, correct? Okay. Yes, we have a question.
When you download a large record set, what is the maximum number of records that you can download at one time?
Depends. The question was, when you download those records, how many can you download at one time? That would be 500, but I could get 1,500 in groups of 500 each, right? So as long as it takes me to click on those 20 pages, do that download, clear them, and then get the next 20 pages.
Revise the search in order to clear.
Nope. Well, you only revise the search to get rid of the check marks. Otherwise, you're going to go back to that same search because you just want to get to the 21st page or the 41st page. Yeah, it's really that easy. You bet. Other questions?
When I help people, I usually say to search either number of employees or by sales, but don't do both, because people tend to want to do both, but you're eliminating a lot of companies that way.
So the comment was, when helping patrons understand how to use the database, instead of using number of employees and sales volume at the same time, do one or the other so that you don't limit the total that you might see. And I would say that in many cases that's correct. There are some cases when that's all they want, because that is their really sweet spot. So it just depends on what that end user might need, right? But you're right, it will eliminate records when you do one versus the other. Other questions? Oh, good.
When the same, when you create your own account,
Yes?
is that just standard, or is that something that they have to purchase themselves?
Oh, they don't have to purchase. No, 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 no. So the comment was, if I choose to set up a personal account, is there a cost? Definitely not. So when I decide I want a personal account, I can register for that, again, using whatever email address I want to use, and then, of course, the password that I create for myself. We'll give them a confirmation back. Here's one thing that can happen. They had an old library that they used to go through, and they used that same email address at that old library. We have to manually switch that at the new library because they won't get in. It will give them a message, hey, we see this is recognized with a different library. Would you give us a call? And then we'll manage that for them. But yeah, there's no charge to take advantage of that personal account. And frankly, it's a great way not to have to reinvent the wheel. Right? If you can't remember, if you used a really intricate search, it's a great way to obviously get back to that intricate search without needing to remember it all. Yes?
On the screen there, it says there's a mobile.
There is a mobile app.
Is that available to library patrons as well?
That is also available to patrons. No charge for that either. You get 2 modules with that particular option. It's the business database and the consumer database. So if you wanted some of that other access, like new movers, new homeowners, you'd have to do that in the regular way that they log into the library, using their library card if they're remote. Yeah. But that can be useful for some. I personally, my phone isn't the largest one on the market, but I'll log into my library's website just using my phone, and that way I have access to all of the modules, and I'm not limited to just those 2. So sometimes I'll want that. Other questions? This was excellent. I thank you, I really do. Let me show you how you can get to the database. I'll just close this tab real quick, and I'm gonna cheat and go right back here to your home page. So here I am at the Schaumburg Township District Library. I can go right under e-library, and then we have the research databases. I would go down to the heading for business and investing. It then presents to you this alphabet. Select the letter R. There's Reference Solutions, formerly Reference USA. I still say that on occasion. If I want to go to the database and I'm outside of the library, I would need my library card number. And do you all require a PIN? Okay, library card number and a PIN in order to get remote access. Within the confines of the library, as you can see when you click on that, it brings you to the database automatically because it recognizes the library's IPs. Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. And if learning aids are still of desire, they will be left for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And go Omaha. I mean, yeah. Oh, did we get that on the recording? Oh, darn it. We need to mention that every now and again, right?